Welcome to The Details in the Dungeon, the show where I take a look at Zelda dungeons in close detail to find out what makes them tick. So join me today as we dive into the Goron Mines in The Legend of Zelda Twilight Princess. Phew, is it me or is it hot in here? Immediately, the atmosphere is set by large streams of lava shooting up into the air and steam billowing out all over the place. There's a web of crazy looking pipes covering the walls and ash floating through the air. It really is in stark contrast with the first dungeon. Leaping over these lava pits is the first indication that timing is going to become a key factor with upcoming puzzles. The player is then presented with a switch puzzle, which is going to become another key mechanic in this dungeon. It's actually taught in a really clever way by having multiple similar puzzles that gradually get harder by adding new layers of strategy. It's pretty clear that standing on the switch is not going to do anything and you need to be heavier, and we learned earlier on that using the iron boots will do just that. And once you stand on the switch with the iron boots, the camera pans to where the column of flame disappears, and a timer starts where you can hear it ticking down. This is your opportunity to run past to the next area. It's also another chance for the player to realise that the iron boots will slow them down, so you have to make sure you unequip them first. The second version of this puzzle has a longer path and 2 jumps that you have to make to get onto the right platform. But if you don't make it on time or you don't realise where you have to go, there is a handy ladder where you can climb up and get back round to where the switch is. There is a small chest over here that entices you over to your first encounter with a torch slug. It shows the player that they are relatively harmless and easily defeated. But over here on the next platform, we're taught that they can drop from the ceiling at any time, so you have to pay attention by looking up as well as down. The third and final switch puzzle of this room has you dealing with a much longer path as well as jumps and narrow pathways. It's really hammering home how timing is really important and you have to remember to unequip your boots. And the room is finished off by you standing on this oversized platform to open the door. So taking a look back, we have learned that you have to time your jumps well to avoid spewing lava columns, weigh switches down by equipping your iron boots, but remember to unequip them, and also pay attention to the ceiling because you never know what's up there or what's going to fall on your head. So it's pretty interesting to think you can learn all that from just the first room in this dungeon. So on to room 2 now, which is surprisingly open compared to the first room. We can take a break from switches for a moment as we head down this pathway towards this lovely blue chest down here that just so happens to stand out really well against the bright reds and oranges of the environment. It's closely guarded by 3 Boldlings, which is honestly kind of a step up compared to most enemies you have fought before, but as this is the second dungeon, we should probably expect that. You pick up a key from the chest, and as you're heading towards the locked door, you come across these rotating platforms where you have to wait for them to flip round before you can jump across, which is another example of how timing is used in this dungeon. Next up we encounter a classic Dodongo, which has actually changed quite a bit. They now have a weak spot on their tail, and hitting them with your sword on the front does no damage. They will try and shoot fire at you, and by dodging this, jumping to the side, you will automatically Z-target the tail instead of the head. This is definitely the coolest enemy design in this dungeon. A few timed jumps and 1 dead Dodongo later, we come across this giant slab of stone that is blocking our path. You can see through the grate here that there is something on the other side, so if we go around there we can see what's going on. There is a large chain and handle that you can grab hold of to pull the slab out of the way, and this is perfect foreshadowing for the dungeon boss, and it's absolutely key that you learn it now instead of later because you're going to be under pressure. Once you squeeze by and enter the next room, we come across a body of water. This room is different in a couple of ways because not only is it very blue in contrast to the red and yellow that we've seen so far, but it introduces a new mechanic that we haven't seen yet, as well as an alternate version of one we have. But when you enter the water, you find that your path is blocked by this metal grate, and you have to put your iron boots on to sink below to get underneath the grate. I was only in the water for a few seconds before Midna opened her big mouth and told me what to do, which was kind of irritating. But when you do go underwater with your iron boots and you step on the switch, it triggers a magnetic field that sucks you up onto the ceiling immediately, which is the perfect way to teach you the new mechanic here. And that's that when wearing the iron boots, you can walk on this particular surface. And the reason it works so well is that it's simply unavoidable, which is a good thing because you need to know how this mechanic works to get any further in this dungeon. In this next room, we meet this steamy little fellow. He's one of the 4 Goron elders, Goramoto. He gives you a key shard, which when combined with the other key shards you'll find, turns into the big key for the dungeon boss. It's really interesting how this room kind of gives you a break from the action and gives you a bit of story to think about. You climb a ladder and exit into the previous room, but this time we're seeing it from above. This is going to become a common theme for this dungeon, where you go through previous rooms in a different way, seeing them from a totally new perspective, which again gives you a reason to look up. And as much as I enjoy walking on the walls and the ceiling, it kind of freaks me out that Link's hat defies the laws of gravity. But it also bums me out that you walk so slow, and in this particular room it takes ages to get from one side to the other. Especially if you take the time to go and get this piece of heart from this hidden chest over here. Back in this room, we step on yet another switch, which triggers this electromagnetic crane to come round and lower down so it can pick us up. This really adds to the visual storytelling in this dungeon, that this really is a mine run by Gorons. Their technology is such that they have to use their weight to get things to work. It's all very simple in design, but it works for the job it's designed to do. In this next room, we come across some Tektites, which is a new enemy for this dungeon. Nothing too hard, but it does add variety. Then there's an underwater chest for you to go and get before heading over to this switch to get onto the ceiling, where you can drop off, put on your boots and get sucked into this wall over here. This is a really satisfying way to change up the way we use a mechanic that we've already learned. And this blue switch, when hit with your sword, opens the door, but it's positioned on the very edge of this ledge, which almost hints that we can hit it with an item that we might get later on. And immediately after, we come into contact with a couple of BMOS enemies, and currently there is no way for us to kill them, but they have a big glowing red gem which screams target, but again we've got nothing to shoot it with. So instead we climb the wall, we get up onto the platform and we head round to where the top of the door is. Since there's no obvious way to open the door with a key or a switch, it becomes clear that you have to swipe your sword at this rope to drop open the door. It's a really clever way to show what has to be done to get through these doors, as later on you're going to encounter them without a physical way to get up there and slash at them. At least you know that breaking the rope will open the door, so if you have a ranged weapon, then that might be the way to go. Here's a room with more of those rotating platforms, and to give you a quick reminder, they place another small one right at the start. Once you've overcome that, then they mix it up a little by having one massive one. And because you're not going to be able to get all the way over in one go, there are some clear areas to use your iron boots so you can magnetize and hang on to the bottom, which is a really interesting way to meld these two mechanics together for one interesting puzzle. And after that, there's another one of those Goron elders. This one looks really ancient, and he gives you another shard of the boss key. He also explains that when the Gorons are in trouble, such as right now, they have the hero's weapon safely stored away, and that you should go and talk to the Goron guarding it so you can help them out. But I have a feeling there's not going to be much talking going on. And we enter the chamber containing this Goron guard, and my god, look at the visual design in here. This is absolutely my favourite room in this temple. There's a pool of lava at the bottom with lava waterfalls flowing into it, and then there's the hanging platform that you stand on that's clearly designed for your iron boots, and it's all held up by some chains that lead to this series of iron girders on the ceiling. And then just in the distance is our Goron friend, who looks incredibly foreboding. He's the most hench Goron we've seen yet, but unfortunately somebody's been missing leg day. And what's cool about this fight is that wherever he stands, he weighs down the platform so it tilts towards the lava. But handily for us, he takes so long drawing his fist back that he has a visual tell that he's going to strike. And this is our opportunity to slash at his big round belly. Stab, 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 stab! And this is the only way to hurt him, because he's so clad in armour, otherwise your sword will just bounce off. So once you do stab him in his Buddha belly, he'll curl up into a ball and roll straight at you. And this is where the game uses that mechanic you learned at the very start of the game when the goats charged you out of the goat pen. You have to press the A button to grab hold of him and then swing him into the lava, which he really doesn't like, and I don't blame him. He bursts out and lands back on the platform, and the process repeats again. If you stand right near the edge, then it's actually a very easy fight and you can just repeat the process and swing him straight into the lava each time. But you also have to remember to equip your iron boots when he does roll at you, which is kind of hinted at by the design of the platform itself being covered in that lovely blue crystal gem. And we have learned about equipping our boots when Goron's roll at us when we was coming up the mountain in the first place. So after we kick his butt, he breaks down and lets us into the next room where we can pick up the hero's bow. Immediately after, we run into one of these doors that we saw earlier. We know we have to swipe at the rope to open the door, but we can't physically reach it. So it's obvious that you have to use the hero's bow to shoot at the rope from a distance. Having this the only way to move forward is a brilliant way to teach the player a potential use for using the bow. In the next room, we run into a whole bunch of BMOS enemies. The one at the far end will trigger when you get close to it, and what's kind of clever here is that these two torches on the side act as a marker to show how far the beam is going to reach. And as I mentioned before, the big glowing red gem screams target, and seeing as you've just got your bow, it seems natural to try and shoot at it with your arrows. What's cool about this room is that there are a lot of targets for you to practice shooting your bow at, and even though they're stationary, they're still spinning round, so that gives you an idea of how to shoot a moving target without them being too threatening. After this, you meet up with the last Goron Elder and get the rest of the big key, before moving on to this room, which is a really awesome room as it combines a lot of the things that we've learned so far in this dungeon in new and interesting ways. First of all, there's some light platforming where you jump across to where these two Dodongos are on this miniature platform. The challenge is timing your jump so you don't hit them and fall straight in the lava. Once you do get to the platform, taking them out isn't as easy as before because there's not much surface area to work with. Once you've overcome this, there's some more light platforming to get around to the next area. But you have to remember to look up because there's a whole bunch of torch slugs on the ceiling that will drop on you and knock you into the lava. This is where you have to take advantage of your new weapon, take them out from a distance before moving forward. Once you get across to the other side, there's a switch that magnetizes you onto the ceiling, where the next challenge combines being upside down while shooting your arrows. There's a Dodongo that can somehow cling onto the ceiling, which makes it slightly trickier to shoot him as you can't just jump around next to him to get to his tower. You have to shoot him from a distance when he's not paying attention. After doing that, there's a small switch inside of a cave that you can only see whilst being upside down, and shooting it will open the door below. So we make our way back outside to this room, which turns out to be a big shooting gallery. It's perfect practice for shooting enemies at a distance. At the end of this room, we make our way past another one of these doors, into a room with some more target practice, and then yet another one of these doors. They're really drumming that mechanic home. And when it falls open, there's a corridor full of nasty enemies that run straight at you. It's kind of a fun release to spin round and just take them all out as quickly as possible, but I did notice quite a lot of slowdown here, which is not really good. Upon entering the boss room, we notice some heavy breathing, and it's very dark and silent. There's a slow pan upwards, and we can see this beast chained up before us. It's very foreboding. It doesn't seem to bother Link that much because he casually strolls up and looks right at it. We get another slow pan before the gem on its head lights up and the camera focuses intently on it. This is foreshadowing that this is going to be the target that you're going to want to shoot with your arrow, just like those red gems on the BMOS enemies before. He lets out a couple of gnarly screams before setting himself on fire and breaking free from his chains. I dread to think what that breath would smell like. The music's really building up and you'll know you're in for such an epic fight. This is one of my favourite bosses in Twilight Princess. Twilight Igniter Virus. He slashes at you with his chains, which forces you to run to the edge of the room where you can take aim with your bow and arrow. Shooting his gem stuns him for a second, where you can run round behind him and grab those chains whilst wearing your boots and pull him back so he trips over. As I mentioned earlier on, we learned this mechanic when we wasn't under pressure. When stunned, he does thrash around a bit, which can make it hard to pick up the chains, but it's definitely doable. Upon falling over, you have to remember to unequip those boots before running around and then slashing at the gem on his head. It's all about timing, remembering to unequip those boots and equip them at the right time, as well as shooting your arrow at the gem on his head. The only thing I'm surprised they didn't do was use the wall walking mechanic or hanging onto the ceiling at some point, but the speed you walk in your boots kind of makes that a no-no because the boss would just be too hard if you were constantly walking around at such a slow speed. However, the floor itself does have some of that blue crystal design on it, which is there to show the player that you do have to equip your boots, because if you didn't, he would just pull you around rather than you pulling him to make him fall over. So another couple of rounds and you defeat Virus, and it becomes clear that the leader of the tribe, Darbus, was in fact taken over by the Twilight and turned into Virus, and by defeating him you have freed him from this evil curse. And that's it for the dungeon. So what do I like about it? Well, I like that there is another story woven throughout the dungeon. The Goron leader was taken over by the Twilight and enemies invaded the mine. And the mine itself does feel like a real place with Goron technology that makes sense in the context of their world. The dungeon has interesting contrasting aesthetics with warm reds and oranges mixed with colder blues and greys. And I did like the puzzle mechanics used, but I did feel that the speed of the boots kind of slowed the pace of the dungeon down a little, and the weighted switches mechanic was overused quite a bit. But the way they mixed the puzzles up by combining mechanics was interesting, and the new perspective created by walking on the ceiling was very cool indeed. So overall I like this dungeon a lot. I think visually it's very cool, and some of the enemy design was particularly nice, especially the Dodongos. But it is a shame that you don't really have any excuse to use your Gal Boomerang that you found in the first dungeon, so that item has suddenly become obsolete. But I would love to hear your thoughts on the dungeon. Tell me what you like and what you didn't like, what you think that Nintendo could have improved upon with this dungeon. I really hope you enjoyed this analysis. I hope you can join me next time where I look at the Lakebed Temple. So all that's left to say is thanks for watching, and I will see you on the next one. Bye!